It all started, as these things often do, with a casual comment over morning coffee, a comment that quickly snowballed into a full-blown mission. We were parked, rather precariously as it turned out, on a tiny overlook clinging to the cliffs of Italy's Amalfi coast, the turquoise Tyrrhenian Sea winking far below. Our camper van, affectionately christened Vanguard, a sturdy, if somewhat portly, Fiat Ducato conversion, felt like a titan amidst the Lilliputian lanes we'd already navigated to get here. John, my husband of 32 adventurous years, was poring over a ridiculously detailed map, the kind that shows every goat path and rogue olive tree. "Right," he announced, tapping a particularly squiggly red line with his pen. "Tomorrow, we tackle the Sentiero degli dei Perduti, the path of the lost gods. Not the walking trail, mind you, but the old coastal road. Infamous. Glorious. Apparently, it makes the roads we've driven so far look like American freeways." Karen, peeked over his shoulder. The line on the map looked less like a road and more like a strand of spaghetti someone had angrily thrown against the paper. "Infamous how?" I asked, already feeling a familiar fizz of apprehension mixed with excitement. "That's van life for you, especially after 50, a constant seesaw of, can we do this, and, we absolutely must." John grinned, a glint in his eye that I knew well. It was his challenge accepted look. Narrow. Unbelievably narrow in parts. Sheer drops. Oncoming traffic that materializes out of thin air, usually driven by locals who believe indicators are merely decorative. And, he paused for dramatic effect, rumor has it, only the most skilled, or perhaps foolish, campervan drivers attempt it with anything larger than a shoebox. That was the spark. "Well," I said, taking a sip of my rapidly cooling espresso, "Vanguard isn't exactly a shoebox, is he?" John chuckled. "That he is not, my love. That he is not. It'll be a tight squeeze, but the views are supposedly legendary. I'll need my best co-pilot," he always said that, and usually, I was. But today, something shifted. "Or," I ventured, a new thought taking root, "maybe your best co-pilot fancies a turn at the wheel for this legendary, infamous, ridiculously narrow stretch." John's eyebrows shot up, nearly disappearing into his salt and pepper hairline. He put down his coffee cup with exaggerated care. "You, Karen. You want to drive the path of the lost gods?" There was no mockery in his voice, just genuine surprise. I'd always been a confident driver, handled my fair share of city traffic and country lanes back in our old life, but since we'd embraced van life 5 years ago, John had naturally taken on the bulk of the driving, especially the more challenging routes. Vanguard, with his considerable girth and length, was a different beast to our old family saloon. "Why not?" I countered, feeling a surge of something, defiance. Determination. "I've watched you do it for thousands of miles. I know how Vanguard handles. It's about time I tackled one of these so-called infamous routes myself." The warnings started almost immediately. Not just from John, though his were gentle and couched in concern. It's very technical, darling. You need to be able to judge the width to the centimeter, and the gears, well, it's a constant dance on those inclines." Then came the remembered voices of fellow travelers we'd met. Old Giuseppe, a seasoned Italian camper we'd shared a bottle of Chianti with in Tuscany, had specifically mentioned this stretch. "Ah, the old Amalfi Road south of Aggirola. Bella, si, but for a van like yours. Molto difficile. My little Cinquecento, she weeps on that road." He gesticulated wildly, mimicking a large vehicle trying to squeeze through a keyhole. Even our daughter, Chloe, on our weekly video call, had chimed in when we'd mentioned our general location. "Mum, Dad, please be careful. I read this blog about a couple who got stuck on one of those Amalfi roads for hours. Said it was terrifying. Maybe stick to the main highways." Bless her. The local cafe owner, Signor Rossi, where John had bought the map, had also offered his unsolicited advice when John mentioned our van. Un camper grande. Su quella strada. He'd shaken his head, puffed out his cheeks, and made a sound like air slowly escaping a tire. Pericoloso. Molto pericoloso. Solo per I pezzi. Only for the crazy ones. So, yes, everyone, it seemed, had warned Karen, me, not to even think about driving Vanguard on that road. Or, by extension, had implied that such a feat was best left to John. And that, more than anything, cemented my decision. I was going to do it. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of Italian sky that looks freshly painted. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and wild thyme. John was quiet, though I could see a flicker of nervousness in his eyes as I meticulously adjusted the driver's seat, the mirrors, familiarizing myself with Vanguard's cockpit from this new, commanding perspective. "You're sure about this, love?" he asked, his voice soft as he buckled his seatbelt in the passenger seat. It felt strange, him over there, me here. "Absolutely," I replied, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. My palms were a little sweaty. "Ready for the best co-pilot in the world to navigate?" He managed a smile. "Always." "Right then, Signora Pilota, slowly does it out of this spot. There's a rather nasty drop to your left if you recall." I recalled. I also recalled Signor Rossi's puffing cheeks and Giuseppe's dramatic pronouncements. Taking a deep breath, I turned the key. Vanguard rumbled to life, a reassuring thrum beneath me. Engaging first gear, I eased us off the tiny, graveled perch. So far, so good. 1 inch at a time. The real journey, the path of the lost gods, was about to begin. The initial few kilometers were deceptively benign, lulling me into a false sense of security. The road, while not wide, was manageable, and the views were already breathtaking, glimpses of sapphire water through gaps in the lush vegetation, pastel-colored villages clinging to impossible slopes. John was an excellent co-pilot, calm and clear with his directions, pointing out potential hazards well in advance. "Sharp left bend coming up, quite tight," he'd say, or, "Watch for scooters, they appear from nowhere." Then, the road began to live up to its reputation. It narrowed significantly, the rock face on one side seeming to lean inwards, while on the other, a low stone wall was the only thing separating us from a dizzying plunge to the sea. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I could feel every single one of Vanguard's 2.3 meters of width. "Okay, this is where it gets interesting," John murmured, his eyes scanning ahead. "There's a pull-in about 200 meters on the right if we meet anything." Famous last words. No sooner had he spoken than a bright red Alfa Romeo, driven by a man gesticulating passionately on his phone, appeared around a blind corner, taking up far more than his share of the road. There was no time for the pull-in. My heart leaped into my throat. Instinct took over. I braked firmly, simultaneously angling Vanguard as close to the rock face as I dared. Inches. I swear there were mere inches between my wing mirror and the ancient stone. The Alpha driver, startled, finally noticed us, slammed on his brakes, and ended his phone call with an explosive Italian phrase. For a moment, we were locked in a standoff. He glared. I held my breath. John leaned forward. "Okay, Karen, easy. He needs to back up, or we do." And backing up here. He didn't need to finish. Reversing Vanguard on this narrow, curving ledge was not an appealing prospect. The Alpha driver, after a moment of dramatic sighing and shoulder shrugging, reluctantly engaged reverse, inching backwards with much revving and disdainful looks. As he drew level, he wound down his window. I braced myself for a tirade. Instead, he peered at me, then at Vanguard, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. "Signora. Molto coraggiosa. Bravo." He gave a thumbs up and, with a final flourish, expertly reversed into a space I hadn't even seen. I let out a shaky breath. "Courageous or crazy, John?" A fine line, my dear," he said, patting my arm. "But you handled that perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. Deep breaths. You've got this." His confidence was infectious, a warm blanket over my jangled nerves. The warnings echoed in my mind: Giuseppe's, molto difficile, Chloe's, terrifying, Signor Rossi's, pericoloso, but that small, unexpected, bravo, from the Alpha driver felt like a tiny shield against them. The road twisted and turned, a relentless serpent carved into the cliffside. Each bend brought a new challenge, a section where the road crumbled slightly at the edge, an overhanging rock that threatened Vanguard's roof, a parked car on a blind corner forcing me to calculate clearances that seemed impossible. I was in a state of hyperfocus, aware of every sound, every slight change in the van's response. I used the gears constantly, engine braking down steep descents, feeling the powerful diesel pull us up equally sharp inclines. John was my second pair of eyes, his calm voice a constant reassurance. "Bit wider here, you can take more of the road. Okay, tight on your left again. Good, perfect." We encountered a local bus, its driver a seasoned veteran who navigated the monstrous vehicle with balletic grace, missing us by a hair's breadth with a cheerful wave and a toot of his horn. I found myself marveling at his skill, and then, with a little jolt, realizing I was doing something very similar. Maybe not with his nonchalant ease, but I was doing it. There was one particularly harrowing moment. We came to a hairpin bend so acute it felt like Vanguard would have to fold in half to make it round. On the outside of the bend was, well, nothing but air and a distant, shimmering sea. On the inside, a sheer rock wall. I stopped, heart pounding. "Okay," I said, my voice a little hoarse. "This looks improbable." John leaned forward, craning his neck. "It is. The map shows it as the Devil's Elbow, charming. You'll need to take it wide, very wide on the approach, then cut in sharply. Use all the road, Karen. All of it. What if something comes the other way?" I whispered, visions of another standoff, but this time with no escape. "We pray to the lost gods," John said, though his attempt at humor was a little strained. "I'll keep a lookout. Edge forward slowly." I took a deep breath, pictured the arc Vanguard needed to make. I edged forward, centimeter by centimeter, my eyes flicking between the near side mirror, the far side mirror, and the view through the windscreen. The steering wheel was hard work at this slow speed. Vanguard groaned in protest as his front wheels reached full lock. For a moment, I was sure we were stuck, the front bumper about to kiss the rock. "More lock, Karen, if you can." "Just a little more," John urged, his voice low and steady. "You're clear on my side, but it's tight. Very tight." I gritted my teeth, pulled on the wheel with all my strength. And then, slowly, miraculously, Vanguard's nose began to swing around. The bonnet pointed, not at the rock, but towards the continuation of the road. The tension in my shoulders eased by a fraction. I'd navigated the Devil's Elbow. I let out a whoop of sheer relief. "Brilliant!" John exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "Absolutely brilliant. Signor Rossi and his Pezzi comment can eat his panettone. You, my dear, are a driving goddess." I laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Don't speak too soon. We're not off this roller coaster yet," but I felt a monumental surge of confidence. That bend had been my personal Everest. The warnings, which had earlier felt like heavy weights, now seemed like distant, amusing echoes. I wasn't just driving, I was mastering this road. I was mastering Vanguard. I was mastering my own doubts. The landscape, when I allowed myself a moment to glance at it, was utterly, overwhelmingly beautiful. Tiny fishing villages were scattered like confetti on the lower slopes, their colorful houses a stark contrast to the deep blue of the sea. Lemon groves terraced the hillsides, their bright yellow fruit like sunshine captured. This was why we did this. This was the freedom, the beauty, the sheer exhilaration of living life on our own terms, one challenging, glorious mile at a time. There was a moment, as we rounded a gentler curve, when John pointed. "Look, Karen. Over there, perched on a crag, seemingly suspended between heaven and earth, were the ruins of an ancient watchtower, silhouetted against the azure sky. The path of the lost gods indeed," he murmured. "And you, my love, are navigating it like you were born to it." I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the Italian sun. His belief in me, even when my own wavered, was an incredible gift. This journey, this van life, it wasn't just about seeing new places, it was about seeing new facets of ourselves, of each other. We started to encounter more signs of civilization, a small trattoria with a hand-painted sign advertising fresh fish, a little cluster of houses, a farmer leading a goat on a rope. The road, while still narrow, felt less intimidating. Or perhaps, I had simply grown. My senses were heightened, I felt connected to Vanguard, an extension of my own will. I knew his dimensions, his turning circle, the rhythm of his engine, as if they were my own. Then, John spotted it. "That's it, Karen. Up ahead. The main road junction. You've done it." The sight of a wider, smoother, two-lane road was like spotting an oasis in a desert. As I indicated and smoothly turned Vanguard onto this blessedly ordinary piece of tarmac, a wave of euphoria washed over me. I'd driven the path of the lost gods. I, Karen, the one everyone, including a small part of myself, had doubted, had conquered it. I pulled over into the first available lay-by, which was thankfully large and flat. I switched off the engine. The sudden silence was profound. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, John turned to me, his face beaming. "Karen," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That was astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. I am so incredibly proud of you." He leaned over and gave me a hug, a proper, rib-cracking, celebratory hug. I leaned back against the headrest, suddenly exhausted but utterly exhilarated. "Wow," I breathed. "We did it. I did it," a huge grin spread across my face. "Take that, Signor Rossi. And Giuseppe. And even you, my darling, with your gentle, it's very technical." John laughed heartily. "I stand corrected. Thoroughly and delightfully corrected. You were a demon at that wheel. A veritable Fangio in a Fiat." We spilled out of Vanguard, stretching our legs, the adrenaline still singing in our veins. The view from the lay-by was spectacular, looking back along the rugged coastline we had just traversed. The sea was a painter's palette of blues and greens, and the cliffs rose majestically, scarred by the improbable ribbon of road we had just traveled. "I can't quite believe I drove that," I said, shaking my head in lingering disbelief. "There were moments, that devil's elbow. I honestly didn't think we'd make it." "But you did," John said, slipping his arm around my waist. "You assessed, you adapted, you conquered. And you did it with grace, my love, even when you were probably swearing blue murder internally." I chuckled. There might have been a few choice words muttered under my breath, yes. Especially when that red Alpha appeared out of nowhere. We recounted the highlights, the near misses, the moments of sheer terror and unexpected triumph. The Alpha driver's bravo. The bus driver's cheerful wave. The feeling of Vanguard's wheels finally gripping tarmac on that impossible hairpin. Each memory was now burnished with a golden glow of achievement. We made coffee right there in the lay-by, the little gas stove hissing companionably. The simple act felt like a celebration. As I sipped the hot, strong brew, I looked at my hands. They were steady now. No longer white-knuckled. They had steered our home, our Vanguard, through one of its toughest challenges yet. "You know," John said thoughtfully, gazing out at the view, "all those warnings, they weren't malicious. They came from a place of concern, of experience perhaps. But they also came from a place of underestimation. Underestimation of me? Or of what a woman in her 50s in a camper van is capable of? I asked, only half joking. Perhaps a bit of both, he admitted. And maybe even an underestimation on our own parts, sometimes, of what we're still capable of learning and achieving. We get comfortable in our roles, don't we? I drive the tricky bits, you navigate. We fall into patterns. It was true. We had our routines, our unspoken agreements. Van life, for all its freedom, can still breed its own kind of habits. This experience had shaken those habits up, delightfully so. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, we found a quiet little, caustic camper, a designated campervan parking area, in a sleepy village a few miles further on. It was nestled in an olive grove, peaceful and serene. The perfect place to unwind and reflect. Later, sitting outside Vanguard in our comfortable camping chairs, a glass of local white wine in hand, the conversation naturally returned to the day's adventure. The crickets were starting their evening chorus, and the air was soft and warm. What I keep thinking about, I said, swirling the wine in my glass, is how easy it would have been to just, not. To listen to all those warnings, to my own little voice of doubt, and say, no, John, you do it. It's too much for me. And you would have missed out on feeling like a rock star, John said, smiling. Exactly. It's more than just the driving, isn't it? It's about pushing those self-imposed boundaries. It's about saying yes to the challenge, even when it scares you a little. Or a lot, I paused, thinking. When we sold the house, when we told people we were going to live in a van and travel the world after 50, we got a lot of warnings then too, didn't we? John nodded. Oh, are you sure, brigade was out in full force. What about your pensions? Your security? What if you get ill? What if you hate it? All valid questions, from their perspective. But they couldn't see what we could see, the possibility, the adventure, the chance to truly live. This felt like a mini version of that, I reflected. A microcosm of the bigger decision. Everyone says, be careful, it's risky, maybe don't, and sometimes, you just have to trust your gut, trust your partner, and trust yourself. It's a core philosophy we've developed on this journey, living fully, 1 mile and 1 story at a time. And this particular story, the one where Karen drove the path of the lost gods despite all the dire predictions, was definitely going into our highlight reel. It wasn't just about conquering a difficult road, it was about conquering a mindset. It was about proving, mostly to myself, that age is no barrier to new skills, new thrills, and new levels of confidence. It also changes the dynamic a bit, doesn't it? John mused. In a good way. Now I know I've got a backup driver who can handle the craziest roads Italy can throw at us. My blood pressure might even thank you in the long run. I laughed. Don't get too comfortable, I might start demanding the driver's seat more often. Especially if there are legendary views involved. I wouldn't expect anything less, he said, raising his glass. To Karen, Queen of the Amalfi Coast, defeater of Devil's Elbows, and steerer of large vanguards through impossibly small spaces. And to John, I toasted back, the world's most patient, encouraging, and occasionally, delightfully surprised co-pilot. We clinked glasses, the simple sound echoing softly in the quiet grove. There was a deep sense of contentment, of a day well lived, of a challenge met and overcome together. This, I thought, is the essence of why we chose this life. It's not always easy. There are breakdowns, both mechanical and emotional sometimes. There are frustrations with navigation, with finding resources, with language barriers. But then there are days like today. Days that stretch you, that test you, and that ultimately, fill you with an incredible sense of accomplishment and joy. The experience did more than just give me a great story to tell. It subtly reshaped my own perception of my capabilities. For years, I'd been happy to be the navigator, the planner, the chef, the chronicler of our journeys. And I still loved those roles. But adding accomplished driver of large camper vans on terrifying Italian roads to my repertoire felt pretty empowering. It was a reminder that growth doesn't stop at a certain age, or when you switch to a life on wheels. If anything, this lifestyle is a catalyst for constant learning and adaptation. I thought about the warnings again. They weren't wrong, exactly. The road was difficult, it was narrow, it was potentially dangerous if not treated with utmost respect and caution. But warnings often focus on the what if it goes wrong, rather than the what if it goes incredibly right. What if you discover a strength you didn't know you had? What if you see beauty that takes your breath away precisely because it was hard-won? What if you create a memory that will make you smile for years to come? That night, tucked into our cozy bed in Vanguard, the scent of olive trees drifting through the open skylight, I felt a profound sense of peace. The phantom sensations of the steering wheel in my hands, the feel of Vanguard responding to my touch, still lingered pleasantly. John, already half asleep beside me, murmured, "You know, tomorrow we could tackle that mountain pass near Ravello. I hear it's even narrower." I swatted him playfully. "Don't push your luck, mister. My nerves need at least a 24-hour recovery period." Besides, I added, a grin spreading in the darkness, "tomorrow, we explore this beautiful area that I drove us to. And maybe, just maybe, I'll let you drive to the Gelateria." He chuckled, a sleepy, contented sound. Sounds like a plan. And it was. Another day, another adventure waiting, another story to unfold. We didn't know what tomorrow would bring, that's the beauty and the uncertainty of this life on the road. But after today, I knew one thing for sure, whatever challenges came our way, we'd face them together. And sometimes, the person you least expect, or the person who has been quietly absorbing skills all along, will step up and steer you through. So, what's the takeaway from Karen's day at the wheel on the path of the lost gods? I suppose it's that sometimes, the most rewarding paths are the ones others warn you against. Sometimes, you have to trust in your own capabilities, even if they're untested. And sometimes, especially when you're navigating life after 50, the greatest adventures come from simply being willing to take the wheel, both literally and metaphorically. The next morning, as we sipped our coffee in the shade of an ancient olive tree, John was already looking at the map again, a familiar glint in his eye. "So, about that road to Ravello," he began. I just smiled. "Let's see the map, co-pilot. Let's see the map." The adventure continues, as it always does. And who knows, maybe the next infamous road will have my name on it from the start. Thanks for joining us on this little escapade. We hope it brought a bit of inspiration, or at least a chuckle, to your day. Until next time, keep living fully, 1 mile, 1 story at a time. We'll certainly be doing our best to do just that, with perhaps a few more shared driving duties from now on.